Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 70 of the Beginner to Master Speedrun. So I'm coming into today rated 2185, hoping to get closer, maybe even break 2200 in this episode. And I did have some really nice games in the last episode, so we'll try and keep it going today. And let's hop into the first game. Okay, first opponent, playing Panquake 9. I'll go for Sicilian. I was toying around with the Stafford Gambit last episode, but playing something a bit more reputable, mainstream, facing the Alapin Sicilian. And I'll go for knight f6 here. And usually I like to play e6, even though this does block the bishop. Very often the bishop will eventually fianchetto to the queen side. And I've played this many, many times over the years. Sometimes white will get the space advantage, having the pawn on d4. And there are cases where white is threatening to take the pawn. This might be one of them. Yeah, I'm just going to take on d4 and then castle. And knight c3 will come with tempo. I like putting the queen back on d6. Even though maybe it looks weird to block the bishop, very often the queen is nice here, preventing bishop f4. And if knight b5, I can drop back to b8 and play a6. And the plan is very often to play a6, b5, bishop b7, complete the queenside development. There's another idea here to play knight b4 to d5, and then just have the knight blockading the pawn. And I think I'd like to start with that. I've played this opening against very strong players, including grandmasters, and a lot of the grandmasters like to play a3 earlier, preventing this maneuver knight b4 to d5. And of course, if I get the chance, I would like to trade knight for bishop, but white is holding on to light squared bishop. So yeah, I'll go for a6. The alternative would have been b6, but I do want to expand with tempo on the queen side. And now it's a question if white can make use of the small lead in development. And white does have all the minor pieces developed, controlling a bit more space. I still have to get this bishop some purpose in life. Yeah, b5 is very natural. Let's go for it. And assuming I can play bishop b7, what used to be my worst minor piece is very soon going to be one of my best minor pieces. Nice long diagonal, long-term pressure against white's kingside. Yeah, knight e5 makes sense. Useful square for white in the center. And I guess now I have a decision to make. Like the simple improving moves are rook d8 and rook c8. I also have the option of taking on e3, which could transform the pawn structure, give white two center pawns, but give me the bishop pair. I'm leaning towards starting with rook, like rook c8 or d8. This bishop isn't really doing that much. Rook c8 I like a bit more. It's the only open file on the board. And this might have the threat of taking, because if rook takes, then a3 could hang in the very end. Another reason why the queen is on d6, potentially pressuring and maybe someday winning the a-pawn. And I also didn't want to trade right away, because I think my knight is just better than this bishop. Maybe we'll see bishop g5 being a bit more active. But bishop g5 I take and probably win the pawn. Maybe queen d3 makes some sense. Over defend the knight. Queen d3 is played. So if I want to, I could trade, like takes. I assume white would take back with rook. And then, I trade again, queen takes, Rook c8, I take over the file. There's also a move like takes, and bishop e4 to throw in. If I can draw the right arrow. I guess queen d2 happens. Let's start with taking. Very possible my other knight will come to d5. Again, if white takes... Oh, white does take with pawn, so... white's giving me the a pawn. It looks like a free pawn. You always want to check, like, when pawns look free, they might be poisonous. But this pawn... I mean, I hit the bishop. If bishop c2... then the c-pawn might hang. Let's go for it. And the c-pawn is definitely the next target. Somewhat backwards on the c-file. Knight d5 is still a resource. I still want to keep in mind bishop e4 as well. Like rook b1 is an innocent move to defend the bishop, but walks into bishop e4, skewering the queen and rook. So I'm not sure what to expect from white. It might already be like not that good. Yeah, rook b1, I think just missing bishop e4. And sometimes when it rains, it pours. In this case, yeah, tactics are pouring down on white's position. And the opponent resigns, so pretty quick win. Not so often you can win so quickly against the Alapin. It's one of the openings that lead to long struggles with this positional imbalance. But we saw that I got my pieces pretty nicely placed from early on, and that just led to quick pressure on white's position. Yeah, maybe white should have played a bit more accurately. Like here, I think a3 is definitely a useful move to start with. Engine actually likes rook c1, maybe preparing the bishop b1 and queen d3 battery. But yeah, gradually, white didn't quite find the right moves. And then I think already here, white's under some pressure. The best move according to the engine is bishop takes d5, which is usually not a move you want to play. When you have the isolated pawn, you want to keep minor pieces on the board. And then here, yeah, knight c3 was best. White should have taken with rook. I think I was going to take, and then play rook c8 and just enjoy life. Engine does give a slight edge for black. So anyway, nice start, up to 2191. Let's keep it going. Okay, next opponent, playing Hexa Tetris. I'll play pawn e4. This time we have modern defense. Play knight c3. And c6. Okay, so this is like a combination of the modern and maybe a delayed Caro-Kann. I'm pretty sure this has a name, which I'm kind of forgetting. I'm pretty sure h3 is one of the main moves here. I'm going to play it right away. The idea is I'm not committing to knight f3. So there are cases where black wants to play bishop g4 and trade off the bishop. And I think in this case, well, here I still have options. I was thinking now knight f3, but there's also the plan of knight e2, g4, and bishop to g2. I'm going to start with bishop e3. I think this is the most flexible move. There's also cases where I play queen d2, long castle, and attack on the king side. Maybe not in this case. b2 is currently attacked. Could just play rook b1. Yeah, d5 is counterproductive. Even though it hits a queen, it walks into this. Maybe I could sack the b-pawn, like queen d2 takes rook b1, and then the queen escapes. Yeah, I'm just going to play rook b1. And I think I will end up going for the plan g4, bishop g2, knight e2. and then eventually castle kingside. I could be a little bit safer with pawn g3 and the same idea. But this is a very harmonious, very solid setup for white. So black is still allowing this. Probably not a great move to commit to just because it opens the bishop. Black would have responses like this or this. Pawn c5. So I'll play knight e2. And next move I'll decide whether to thrust my g-pawn 1 square or 2 squares. Black wasting some time with the queen. Maybe preparing pawn b5. Yeah, let's go ahead and play g4. And bishop g2. And I like the setup from the white side, because after castling, my king is still very safe, but there's also potential to attack on the king side. And there's a lot of moves to keep improving the position, like knight g3, f4, queen d2, rook be1, maybe eventually pawn storming even further. And in the meantime, black is a little bit cramped. Like, we're probably going to see either b5 or e5 eventually. So what do I want to start with? I should also be considering moves like g5. Just kick the knight. g5 might allow knight h5. So knight g3 looks pretty nice. Reinforcing e4. Also maybe preparing g5, because knight h5 would then not really be possible for black. Black goes for pawn e5. Okay. So, I mean, g5 is the first move that comes to mind. I think the knight would be forced back to e8. And black could maybe throw in the capture. And there's a line, g5 takes, I take the knight, I lose a bishop, I win this. Wait a minute, g5, take. Oh, that would just win a piece for me. So I win 2 minor pieces. So black can't take here. Black would have to move back. And then maybe d5 makes more sense. Or even something like f4. All right, let's go for it. Gaining space, getting some initiative. Yeah, knight e8 is not the most pleasant square for the knight. b4 comes to mind. And there's also the idea of h4, h5, and storm the h-pawn. I'm not seeing anything that's looking like amazingly good. There's just a lot of pleasant moves to choose from. I'm just realizing my time was covered by the weird streak thing. Sorry about that. Hopefully the layout's okay. Didn't even notice. So I'm falling below 6 minutes. Yeah, f4 maybe is the most confrontational, but also the spiciest. Let's go for f4. Looking to transform the position. If black allows me, I want to play f5 and f6. Trap in this bishop. And if black takes on f4, then f5 will become open. Black takes on d4. I'm just realizing that black can probably force a queen trade with takes, and queen c5. Which I think is coming. It's not the type of position I want to trade queens. Maybe I should have played something else other than f4. But I think it's still looking pleasant for white. I'll play rook d1. Defend the queen, try and use the d-file. I still have the space advantage. I could play king h2. Black is maybe looking to play this move. Another idea is taking. Let's assume knight takes. And then pawn e5. Looks a little bit anti-positional because I give away the square. But the idea would be to play knight e4, knight f6. I don't think I want to commit to that. There's also b4 here. Induce a trade and go after d6. I'm realizing king h2 would threaten to take the pawn. So king h2, I take, knight e6, rook d2. Yeah, let's go for this. A small improving move, but unpinning my queen, making this threat. And this position looks still like very pleasant for white. So I have the very simple idea of doubling up on the half-open d file, and it's not easy for black to achieve this d5 move. Black wants to maybe, yeah, like if I play rook d1, then there is some knight e6 hitting f4 and d4. So can I play pawn f5? f5 supported. And it restricts anything coming to e6. Yeah, let's go for it. Sometimes a drawback of such a move is it gives away control over e5. But yeah, neither knight is really close to landing on e5. And yeah, I'm just restricting this knight and this bishop. Pawn is defended by my knight and rook. And I'm getting closer to this plan of eventually knight e4 to f6. I might have the idea of b4, kick this knight, and then play knight ce4. Okay, so black is preventing b4. Yeah, definitely have to watch my time. I might play h4 and just try and get my pawn to h6. Like, I want to move the rook, but it's tied down to the pawn. And this also enables me to play bishop h3 to over-defend this pawn so I can mobilize a rook or even the knight. But if I can get in h5 and then h6, where is this knight going? Like to e8, back to e8, and then I play knight h5, and I might eventually have a mating attack on the king side, despite the fact that queens are off the board. Black goes for d5. The d-pawn is still pinned, so I still maybe have ideas of this. But let's start with this. I guess it's still a question. Like, if I get in this, and then knight e8, knight is controlling f6. So how to break through? Like, do I want to consider g6? Knight d7. It's very tempting to sack the bishop and then get this knight into play. It's probably not necessary. This knight might want to reroute. And knight e4 is no longer possible. Maybe I can play f6, knight e8, and then knight f5. I do deprive myself of getting the knight to f6 anytime soon, but I open up the f5 square. Okay, knight e6 I should have seen coming. Somehow I just missed this move. I have to move the rook. If I move it here, there's knight e5. So I guess I move it. Ooh. Am I spoiling this? Rook g4, knight e5. I don't like what I did. I could play rook h4. I really don't like what I did there. So if takes, I have rook g4, h6, knight f5. Maybe even h6 first. It's still looking good for white. I shouldn't panic. But I do have to watch my time. Opponent is resisting pretty well. Yeah, knight takes g5 could be a threat. But I have this move now. And if knight takes g5, rook g4. Oh, but then 96? It does get a little bit weird. Yeah, black goes for this. I want to play this. But then bishop takes knight and then h6. What to do? If I play knight h6 first, this might be the best course of action, knight h6. And now this knight is tied down to f7 after king h8. And maybe rook... It's getting messy. Rook... A bishop h1 first to prepare rook g1. I gotta move a lot quicker. I might be in trouble here. It looked so nice earlier, but kind of losing the thread. I want to play this. And then have ideas of rook g8 eventually to mate the king. If black plays rook e8, rook g1, rook e5, I can take. Take and then fork. So black might end up playing this. Which I wouldn't mind, because that would block the bishop and allow me to double up the rooks. Yeah, the whole point of bishop h1. Okay, so rook d6, I think I just play this. Oh, but f6 hits my knight, so maybe I play this first. And this will come with tempo. I have to move back. I could move forward too. Let's move back. I didn't want to align myself with the bishop. I still want to play rook g1. Below a minute. Black has over 3 minutes. That's a good move. Oh, but there's a trick. If knight e4, it's mate in 2. Rook g8, I sack and then checkmate. That's very easy to miss. Black does miss it. Okay, rook g8. Oh no, my rook. But oh yes, my checkmate. Okay. Yeah, definitely came away a little bit fortunate there. My opponent did resist like really, really well. I did let my opponent off the hook too, playing this f6 move. Totally unnecessary. Basically gave away my whole advantage. It went from almost +3 to -0.5 after pawn f6. I think I just missed 96. It was just a blind spot. I had in my mind that after this, I'm forcing 98, and I think I just assumed the same thing with f6, forgetting that I give away control over e6. So let's go back. Let's take away some lessons. Yeah, this modern opening. So just to explain further, the point of h3 is that if I play knight f3 in this position, black can play this, and then if this, then there's this. And a lot of players sometimes like to play the structure where they trade off light squared bishop and then put all the pawns on light squares and then maneuver the knight to f5 or go for f6. So I wanted to play a bit more restrictively. And yeah, here if black plays d5, I can play e5 and this bishop is stuck. And very often, white can expand with g4 and f4 and get a really nice space advantage on the king side. I actually learned like this line from chessmove.com. They have a whole course on how to play this as white. But when black plays d6, then yeah, I just reverted to a different setup. And yeah, this was very pleasant. Engine likes white's position. Yeah, after I played f4, I slightly regretted it. f4 is still one of the top engine moves. The best move here is pawn d5, which I think I considered like briefly, but I didn't end up looking like closely into. A d5 is nice and positional, shutting down the center, making it so that this bishop and this knight have a very hard time re-entering the game. But f4 was played, queen trade was offered, and then it was still pleasant for white. And then, yeah, once I gave away the whole advantage, it was just a big mess. Apparently knight f8 was a blunder. Black can take right away. Because, yeah, rook g4, there's h6, and I can't really break through. And then the engine does like this for white. I was happy with bishop h1. It's not within the top 4 engine moves, but it still keeps the edge. And the idea is to play rook g1 to directly hit the knight. And then I'm actually very surprised. The engine says white's pretty much winning here. And during the game, I didn't feel like I was winning, but once I saw the idea of rook g8, I felt a little bit more relaxed. And of course, my opponent just walked straight into it. So, I mean, black could have kept the game going. The best move would have been bishop e8. And then, yeah, white has some nice options here. I think knight f4 makes a lot of sense to get rid of one of the knights. Black is a little bit stuck with this rook and bishop and king. And yeah, the combination of the pawn on f6 and knight on h6, it's a really dominant setup. It restricts black in so many ways. So up to 2198. Let's do one more. Let's try and get to 2200 this episode. 2200 is it's a national master rating according to US Chess. On chess.com, it's just another number. And I'm playing Universal Grandmaster Chess. Okay. Good luck to my opponent. We have a Queen's Gambit. Queen's Gambit with e3. Not the most active opening. Against this, I do like to play pawn a6. The idea to eventually take and play b5 and c5. I'll play knight d7 here. I'm basically waiting for the bishop to move before I take, but white takes first, which is fine with me. And I'll develop. And I think here, do I want to start with b6? I probably just want to start with castling. And then decide if I want to play b6, bishop b7, or rook e8, knight f8. Develop the bishop a bit more normally. Yeah, it's possible white might go for e4. The drawback of e4 is after the trade, white is left with the isolated queen's pawn. So, I mean, this is still a viable plan. b6, bishop b7, and then I'd be ready to plant the knight on e4. If I play knight f8, I'm not really preparing to develop the bishop actively. These squares are covered. I'm a little bit hesitant to play b6 because after e4 takes, my rook is hit, bishop is well placed on e4. So what to do? Like maybe it's worth starting with knight f8. Knight f8 to g6. I could also maybe go for c6 and knight e4. Then queen c2 happens. Okay, I'm going to play knight f8 first. I don't want to burn too much time early on. But there are definitely some nuances to consider in terms of the move order black chooses. Bishop d2, I'm not sure what the bishop is doing. Maybe just preparing rook to c1. I could continue with knight g6. Let's look at this again. b6, e4, takes, takes. And then maybe I just play bishop e7, allow the trade takes, takes. I concede the bishop pair, but I have a very nice fianchettoed bishop. And the structure could then resemble the first game of this episode, where I'm playing against the IQP. And I'll have a nice bishop on b7. White goes for queen c2. Yeah, h7 is very well defended. And rook c1. So I don't think I'm scared about any c-file pressure, because the bishop's always defending. I mean, can I just go ahead and play knight e4? Because it's supported by the pawn bishop battery and the rook. Knight takes e4 gets forked. Sometimes one thing to calculate is knight e4, knight e5. And then if I take, and then take, and then take, there's sometimes takes and then takes and then takes, but the bishop would be hanging. Yeah, I think this is okay, knight e4. And this can open up some nice attacking potential on the king side. Just clamping down in the center, enabling f5. Also unleashing the queen. Like sometimes queen f6 can come, knight g6, knight h4. And white's a little bit passive with these pieces. Like they're decently placed, but they're not really doing too much to create threats in the position. a3 is a good sign. Yeah, knight g6 looks very natural. Just improving, discouraging any knight e5 ideas. Very often you see this setup from a Colle opening with reverse colors. But these pieces harmonize really well together. Like all the minor pieces serve a purpose. Even though the bishop's blocked by a pawn, it still helps influence the center. Can I play queen f6 here? Attacking the knight. Knight is pinned to the f-pawn. That would probably induce king g2. I'm just wondering if I have a follow-up there. But even if I don't, it looks pretty good. Like maybe h5 to increase pressure. There might also be the idea of bishop c8 and then targeting h3. I'd have to watch out for the d5 pawn. But for example, king g2 is not played. Queen d1 is played. Yeah, all these things seem a little bit soft in white's position, but I'm not seeing any tactic. Always got to consider the sacrifices. I don't think it's worth sacking on g3. Mainly looking for ways to make a threat. Should definitely look at the captures too. Knight d2 would force knight takes d2. I mean, c5 is a natural improving move. h5, h5, h4. Maybe I can start with h5. Just creating the possibility of pawn breaking. And if white plays h4, then now I'm thinking the bishop really wants to reroute. I don't think it can right away because knight takes d5. So So I think I just want to over defend d5. Yeah, I'll go for c6. It's true the bishop looks really sad, but it's only temporary. If it can get 2 more moves, it'll be very happy. I should also keep in mind knight takes h4, because knight takes h4 is met with forced mate. Pawn takes h4, queen g6. I probably should have looked at this last move. King here, it's mate. So take, queen g6, king f1 would be forced. I'm not sure if black has anything there, but maybe then bishop c8. A very rich attacking position. White's trying to be safe and solid. Bishop is likely coming to g2. Yeah, now if takes, queen g6, there's bishop g2. So, yeah, bishop c8. Let's go for it. We might see knight takes knight. Pawn takes and then knight h2. It looks really passive for white, but it might keep white alive. And actually in that line, c6 and h5 are both attacked. White doesn't go for it. Okay, now we'll play bishop g4. I definitely want to analyze that after the game. Like, that may have been totally fine for white. But now the knight's pinned, and both the bishop and the queen are tied down to defending the knight. And it's really not easy to escape the pin. I think this only makes things worse for white, because after takes, I have another attacker. I think white is crumbling to the pressure. I can take the knight, bishop's defended. If bishop b4, I can defend. I could also take and counterattack. Okay, how fancy do I want to be? Takes. But there's also just takes, and black is up a rook. Yeah, in this line, I'd be up a piece. Up a minor piece. So let's take the rook. I did lose a couple pawns, but that's okay. Trade bishops. If we trade bishops, I can't really defend h5. But what else to do? All right, we'll trade bishops. And as long as I move quickly, things should be fine. Looking at knight e5 here. Knight e5, queen h5. Yeah, that's kind of a fancy move. Exploiting the fact that pawn is kind of pinned to the bishop. And the knight does have some nice opportunities to maybe pounce on. Like queen takes h5, I'm thinking either queen d5 or queen g6. And queen d5 would threaten knight f3 with the quadruple attack. And if white ever takes, I'm happy to take the bishop. That's a cool move. Using the pin, using this alignment, and using the very weak f3 square in white's position. The king would like to move here to a square where the knight can't check it. But yeah, it can't move here or here. If it moves here, it's still check. And of course, yeah, if it takes, I trade. And just over 2 minutes. Should be plenty of time. I'm hitting the rook and the pawn. If rook b1, I'll probably play queen c2. In this case, we can trade. Was looking to trade rooks. Yeah, it's very, very good that I'm missing an h7 pawn. King has a getaway. Yeah, just going after the queenside pawn. Now the kingside pawn. There's no way for white to defend f2. I guess the f pawn could move, but then I'm just mating. Okay, and white resigns. So pretty smooth game. Hopefully this was a nice example of how to just get a really nice setup against a slightly passive queen's gambit from white, especially when the opponent blocks in the bishop like this and then trades. This is usually the setup I like to go for as black. I did take some time early on deciding between some of the nuances, mainly between rook e and b6 here. Or actually, in this position, between knight f8 and b6. But I think knight f8 was more flexible. And I think the main moment I want to look at is a bit later on. I was building up the attack, checking the engine. Doesn't seem like I missed any like insane sacrifices. Engine does prefer c5 here, but h5 is still fine. And then, yeah, it really doesn't like this move c6. I guess in this case, because there's takes, and knight g5, and my e-pawn's a bit loose. If I play c5, my h-pawn is also loose. Yeah, I think I got a little bit too comfortable. So this is the first opportunity from white, where, yeah, because my bishop's blocked in, then it doesn't help support the center. I did have good intentions with rerouting the bishop, but white could have seized the opportunity. And going forward, okay, in this position, the engine points out a crazy sacrifice. Knight takes g3 is the only move to keep black's advantage. Takes, I'd hit the rook. And I'm trapping the rook, because if rook e2, I win the knight. Queen's no longer defending. And then I'm ready to take the rook, or maybe even the pawn next move. I went for bishop c8. And in this position, I realized that white can go for takes. And then after takes, I was calculating knight h2, which is good for white. But the best move for white is knight g5. And I think this was just a blind spot. And queen h5 is actually a big threat. But then having ideas of queen h7, c6 is hanging. And this is +2 in white's favor. Like, there's bishop g4 here. But then after queen c2, these pawns are still attacked. I would have to lose one of them. Okay, so I guess a big takeaway is that when I'm building up the attack, I still have to watch out for white's ideas. And yeah, h5 was maybe a little bit too reckless. And if I play c5, then I'm just improving the queen side, not blocking in my bishop, and life would be good. Thankfully, my opponent did not punish me, and then, yeah, I got into a very difficult situation. This was just I think ending the pain quicker than if white just waits and deals with a pinned knight. The best move here was knight to b1, maybe aiming to reroute the knight to d2. But yeah, of course, once white gave the piece, I don't think there's much more to analyze. So, okay, I've officially broken 2200 up to 2204. And before I end, I do want to just address the question. A lot of people have been asking, when will the speedrun end? And I think my goal is to get to at least 2400. So that means we'll have a bunch more episodes. Hope you guys have been enjoying the episodes recently. And as always, if you have questions, do leave them below. And if you like the content, do subscribe. And I'll see you guys soon for the next episode. Stay tuned.